Welcome to Hungry for Answers with me, Robin Clare, recovery coach professional. Do you love food, alcohol, drugs, sex, social media, cigarettes, or gambling a little too much? The traditional narrative says that addiction to these vices is the problem. The truth is, they are just symptoms. This hit show takes you from recovery to your ultimate life as my special guests and I help you discover how underneath every vice is the addiction to the suffering that developed due to unhealed trauma. So what can you do? Hungry for Answers provides groundbreaking, proven solutions from my best-selling spiritual book, Feast and Famine: Healing Addiction with Grace. It's time to stop suffering and start living your ultimate life. You have a divine right to a life filled with love, joy, peace, and abundance. Hungry for Answers starts now. Hello and welcome to Hungry for Answers with me, Robin Clare, and Happy New Year, everyone. So at the end of each year, in the beginning of the new year, what I do is in my meditations, I ask my guidance, what do you want me to learn this year? Like what should be my focus of my learning? And in 3 different meditations, I heard surrender your story. And of course, I needed to understand what that meant. And so I did a little more introspection on that because I kept thinking, which story is that? You know, the one about my parents, the one about my work, the one about my addiction, which one? The one about my relationships, everything. And I'm like, and then I heard surrender them all. And so this is my goal for this year, is to figure out, what does it mean to surrender my story? And I've surrendered a lot of my story. That's how I was able to write books and do different things. And then of course, I look at who's my first guest in the new year, and it's Ruth Griffin. And Ruth is an author of When Love is Angry with her husband Maurice, and 6 other books. And she's a co-podcaster on the podcast Authors Up, and founder of the Studio Griffin. And I'm thinking, I spoke to Ruth last year, maybe in the fall, and I put her as the first person up this year. So I think, and then as I studied Ruth's story, I realized she understands what it means to surrender your story. So I love how the universe conspires to bring us exactly what we need. And so welcome, Ruth, to Hungry for Answers.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So the first question I ask all my guests is, were you ever hungry for answers at a time in your life where you thought you would never get the answers that you need, but when they came, they were exactly what you needed?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the journey that I have been on as a person, I've had my own addictions, my own issues, including mental illness. And it's just, those don't come with a lot of answers. There's no manual for life. So, in order for me to get to a place of healing, I had to be hungry for answers. I had to start looking for those answers
Mhm.
to get to the place where I'm at today. And all of them, I mean, I'll be honest, there were some tough answers. There were some times when I was just like, am I sure, God, that this is what you really want me to do? But,
Yeah.
ultimately, every one of them were what I needed.
Yeah, and I loved what you said. I got to a place where I was hungry for answers, but there was something about that when you said it that I haven't really thought about before, and that is, we have to be hungry
Mhm.
for answers. Like, the word hungry is really important.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're not going to do whatever it takes to get the answers that we need for our
Yes.
lives, right? We're going to still continue in the addictive type of, maybe we'll see what happens, and or
Mhm.
maybe something better will happen, or maybe someone else will change and not me, or maybe what I have isn't so bad, right? But when
Right.
we're hungry for answers, it's it's almost like inside of ourselves we know that whatever is going on, is not the end of the line.
Right.
And if we want something better, we better get hungry for it and get the answers that we need. And so let's talk about your and your husband Maurice's book, When Love is Angry. Can you tell our audience about this book?
Yeah, absolutely. My husband and I got married, I think 23 years ago. And at that time, we were young, young family. We were in the midst of moving from Ohio to North Carolina, and our marriage was in a good spot. And fast forward a few children and a bipolar diagnosis for me,
Mhm,
it's quickly started going downhill
mhm,
because we again, no one really talks about this, but we aren't told, okay, this is what you do. you know we're just told. I was pretty much given a bottle of pills and said, hey, take these. You're going to have to
mm,
start going to therapy, and good luck. In my life, that I was not able to fully articulate to my husband, and my husband on you know, for his end, he was not the talker. He's not the most romantic type. So for him, it was hard to accept that, okay, why isn't she just pulling herself up by her bootstraps? And, okay, everybody goes through this. So it was a lot of back and forth. And, it got to the point where my husband and I were not talking. We were headed in a bad spot. And
mhm.
it took our faith, it took us searching for answers. It took both of us searching for
Mm,
answers,
love that.
um, so that we could turn our marriage around. And I, in turn, could start healing from the bipolar and, all the other things going on in my life. And it's been a completely 180
Mhm.
since
So
then.
can I ask some questions about some of
Absolutely.
the things that you said? Did you both have the faith before this journey that you went on searching for answers? Were you both faith-based?
We were both faith-based. I think it was more of a, okay, this is what our parents taught us, and we're
Yeah.
good to go. But it wasn't until we both started applying that faith that we started to see answers and to seek answers as well. So,
Yeah, and so I'm asking that question because I want to follow up that question with for those who are listening that may not be faith-based, but may want to consider that
mm,
there should be no stopping them, right, for getting answers in their life about their anger, their addiction, their whatever, right?
mhm,
Their whatever is going on, their conditions.
right.
And I was just curious for you, but I imagine faith can happen any second of any
Yes.
day, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is one thing that I've considered as I've gone on this journey is, okay, so if I was sharing this, how would I share this with someone who does not believe the same thing I do? Because not everyone will,
Right.
and I think the truth is, from my perspective, we were made to be creatures of faith. Now whatever we put our faith in, that's all individual, but it's just we that is who we are. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of the answers that I found are very practical. They're in our everyday lives.
Mhm.
Part of the issues that I was dealing with had to do with diet. So it wasn't necessarily that my answer was uber spiritual or everything like that, but no, it was, okay, what if you made these changes to your diet? What if you implemented these changes? And that is a very practical approach that someone who may not believe the same way I do can say, okay, well, if I'm looking for answers to a particular issue, maybe I start here. Maybe I start with, the practical, with what I can see, because
Mhm.
of the truth of the matter is, we all need to eat. We all need to, drink water and all of that. And that is always a place to start if something is ailing our bodies, or if we're having issues, whatever they may be, whether it's stress or whatever it is. So
So you can have faith in the belief that life can be better,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. I think
And
that
yes, go ahead,
very
please.
crucial to it, because until you start believing that life can be better, it's just going to continue being what it is.
Mhm. And I think when you open yourself up to this belief that life can be better, whether you're faith-based in the traditional way or faith-based in the spiritual way or faith-based in the nature way or faith-based in a way you don't even know,
Mhm.
once you declare that life can be better, life there grace comes in all different forms, right?
Right.
Right? It can even come with the proper nutritionist, right?
Hmm.
Or somebody to come into your life that says, hey, let's do it this way. Let's look at
Absolutely.
whether sugar is having an impact on your emotions.
Hmm.
And so the key is to believe in yourself, right?
Yes.
And to believe in what is best for you
Yes.
and that you will find the answers. And I love that because I think we're constantly looking outside of ourselves, right? But the faith starts from within, with a
Hmm.
knowing in your heart. And then if you need other faith, because we are divine beings, right? We are
Right.
sparks of God. And right. So everything that we need is technically inside of us to 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 have the life that we most desire. But it's also wonderful to have outside energies that we can look to provide us with additional guidance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that there, because, we, I heard someone say, that often, I'm a Christian, and often we tend to think of God as, um, all being all powerful, but we don't see ourselves as an image of Him,
Mhm.
So until we see ourselves as that, I think our view of, whatever greater power there is often marred by our view of ourselves. So
Oh,
if I cannot think of myself as an image of God, as having everything I need in me already, then I think that that really hampers what I can do in my life for the best, for the best me.
I think so too. And it's not you're not giving up on God
Mm-mm.
when you go inside. In my first book, Messiah Within, I wrote it with Yeshua, who most everybody knows as Jesus.
Mhm.
And the name of the book, even Messiah Within, the intention is that God really meant it when or when he said that to Yeshua that the kingdom of God resides within.
Mhm.
Like that's where it is. It's within. And
Right.
so we have to learn to nurture that our own place within. How I do it, just as to share with the listeners, is I envision in my heart center this heart's temple. And I'll go in there and I'll sit in a chair and I'll call in whoever can help me with this situation. And when I open my eyes in my meditation, in my heart's temple, there's always a being of light that is there to support what it is that I'm trying to accomplish and help me with answers. And then
Mhm.
there's always a cast of characters that are always there, like my dog that passed, my dad,
Mhm.
different people, my grandparents, they're always hanging around this room. And this room is just really beautiful. It's decorated like how what I would think a sacred temple should is a bad word, but what I think a sacred temple is.
Mhm.
And so that's my own, it's inside my heart. And I go there. I go there. It has big, beautiful wooden doors. I open the doors. I walk in. There's two chairs. I sit down, two very beautiful chairs.
Mhm.
I'm sharing all this so that if folks need a way to access their inner divinity, this is how I do it. There's a beautiful chair, and then there's another beautiful chair where I welcome in the energy of other beings of light that would like to support me with
Mhm.
where I'm going. So, another question for you
Sure.
is, how was it to write a book with your husband?
I will say that it was unexpected,
Mhm.
because I didn't take the initiative. My husband actually was the one, we had come to a better place in our marriage, but we still weren't talking as much as we could.
Mhm.
And this was his way of communicating with me. So he actually
Mm.
took it upon himself to write everything down and kind of explain to me what had gone on with him for the past few years. And it just, it opened up such a place of healing for us in that. But, it was a little daunting for me to have to say that, okay, now I have to write my part, because when he gave me what he wrote, he said, well, I think we should write this book together. Here you go. So,
Mhm.
I was in a better place. I was still walking through my healing. Um, and in that, it was scary to me, because I had not gone through and experience, I felt like if I had to go through and write everything, then I would have to revisit all that, and just it would hurt again, basically. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it, but eventually I did, and it was very gratifying, because I came to a better place of healing. Those things don't affect me the same way they used to. Those memories, those thoughts of,
Right.
how I may have acted or said or done anything when I was in the midst of, when I was in the worst of the bipolar.
Yes.
So,
So, yeah, as a recovery writing coach, I know that for sure. When you take your story and put it down on paper, it is so healing for you.
mm,
And then when you share it, it's healing for others.
yes.
But it's amazing what you can get done. And what I love about your story here, or about writing with your husband, is I can just imagine how much how solid it made your relationship
Mhm.
to go through that process together. So um, I love it, because I think that sometimes we feel like we can't turn to our partners
Right.
for support, and here he is leading the way,
Mhm.
right, to bring you to this place of healing. I think kudos to him and to you, because it, doing anything with our partners can turn into struggle. And
Yes.
so I think that you guys really also set a wonderful example for your children on
Mhm.
how to truly be in partnership. So good going on that.
Thank you.
Um, so when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about surrender. And in Feast and Famine, I wrote this book with Sophia, the divine feminine, Holy Spirit, Shekhinah, many
Mhm.
names. And she said that surrender is required. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is an option, but surrender is required, and grace must be allowed. So when we come back, we're going to start talking about why surrender is required. What is it? What does it mean to surrender your story? So stay tuned, everybody. You're listening to Hungry for Answers, and we'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to Hungry for Answers with me, Robin Clare. If you would like to learn more about my work, please go to clarity.com. That's CLARE-ITY.com. And I'm here with Ruth Griffin. And Ruth, how can people reach out to you?
You can visit my website, ruthegriffin.com. I'm also on social media, Ruth Elena Griffin, on Facebook and Instagram.
That's great. That's great. So it's time to give away something. So I'm going to give away a copy of Feast and Famine, Healing Addiction with Grace. And Ruth is going to give away When Love is Angry. It's a book
Mhm.
that she wrote with her husband, Maurice. And if you would like to receive either one of these copies, please call 1 800 930 2819. All right, moving into this segment, we're going to talk more about the concept of surrender. So, as I said, in Feast and Famine, I learned that surrender is required. And what that said to me is, um, well, there must be something else other than surrender if surrender is required. And or that surrender, maybe I don't know what surrender is. And that was part of writing the book, for me to really understand what surrender is. What I learned is what surrender is not, for sure. I learned that surrender is not wishful thinking.
Mhm.
I wish this would go away. I wish I had a better option. I wish. And wishing does not bring about grace. What brings
Mhm.
about grace is surrender, and surrender is something like, I will never do that again. I am done with that. And
Mhm.
when you really feel it in every bone in your body, that enough is enough. The last time with my bulimia, the last time I had a bulimic episode, I was bleeding. I had pain all over my body. I knew that the divine was showing me it's almost like they turned my body inside out so that
Mhm.
they could show me what I was doing to my body. And I knew at that moment I was done, done.
Mhm.
And I have been done for all the years that I'm in recovery. So what do you think about that? What do you think about the concept of surrender versus wishful thinking?
And it's interesting because some of the folks that I talk to, um, when it comes to bipolar, one of the things that I have to tell them is that you have to learn how to accept this diagnosis.
Mhm,
Oftentimes we sit there and we talk about, oh, well, it's maybe that's something else, or, like you said, it's, we think wishful thinking. For me, I spent a lot of years going, God, I don't understand. Why? And I wasn't looking for an answer. I was looking for an excuse. I was looking for a way out, and until I could surrender myself to say, I accept this diagnosis, which for
yes.
me meant this is my new normal. This is something that I have to deal with. I can't keep running away from it. It's not going to get better if I ignore it. I can take my pills, and I went to therapy sessions and I wrote it in the book. It was, I was getting nothing out of them because I was putting nothing in. You know,
Mm,
I was going through all the motions, but until I could honestly say, this is not who I am, but this is what I am dealing with. This is what's in my cards right now. I could not get the healing or the grace to get the healing, you know,
yeah.
until I could surrender myself to that diagnosis. Now, it doesn't mean that the diagnosis won. It just means that that's what I'm dealing with, and until you
Yes.
can admit that, it's not going to take place.
Yeah. So I love that um, you have to accept what is
Hmm.
before you can make any change.
Hmm.
And such an important spiritual concept, acceptance,
Hmm.
and one that I'm hoping the listeners really take to heart from your story, because acceptance is the first step,
Yeah.
right? The first step to surrender. So thank you for that. And I love how you worded it. I accept this diagnosis.
Hmm.
Because if you don't accept it, you're not open
Right.
to. All right, thank you. So acceptance, I'm thinking acceptance is a form of it of of surrender. And when you accept, you are in surrender. And then the grace of healing will arrive. The grace that allows you to see healing coming from all different directions,
Hmm.
all
Hmm.
different people coming into your life. I accept that I have an addiction problem.
Hmm.
That acceptance, I accept that I have a diagnosis. I accept that there's something wrong with my relationship. all of those is important. So
Yes.
we have a caller for the giveaway, Charlene McKinley. So Charlene, we will get the book out to you. I will check in with Transformation Talk Radio to find out which book you're looking to receive, but we'll make sure you get it. So thank you for calling in. Okay, so Surrender Your Story is the name of this episode.
Mhm.
And in the write-up, I wrote, no matter how profound or scary your story is, when you surrender your story, you welcome in the grace of healing. So what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the idea, even the idea? I just love how the divine said to me, surrender your story. It's like, which story, right? Which I shared with everybody. Which story are you talking about? Because I tell myself a lot of stories. But do you think, Ruth, that when we have all these stories playing in our world, we are really stopping grace from arriving?
I think when we hold onto those, those stories, that's when we stop grace. Um,
Mhm.
our stories are meant to be told. All good stories are meant to be told, and even some of the bad ones.
Mhm.
Um, we before even written language, there was oral stories, and they all had a purpose. And I think that that's the part that we've come to where we don't understand the purpose of a story. They don't understand the purpose of our story. The fact that we all have a story. And, like you said, when we share it, that's someone else's healing. That's
Mhm.
someone else's. And I think that we're starting to see a shift even in our society, where people are now telling their stories, and people are coming out of stigma, the stigma around, you know, uh, different areas. Because I mean, even, a woman breastfeeding, there's stigma there. So,
Mhm.
when people are able to share their stories, that's when grace abounds. That's when, you know, the healing can do what it's meant to do. A doctor who has medicine but keeps it in his file cabinet, he isn't doing anybody any good. But it's when he shares it, gives it to the appropriate person, gives the appropriate amount, that's when transformation happens. And that's,
Mhm.
when we tell our stories, it's not for everybody. Not everybody has
Right.
mental illness, not everybody has, eating disorders or anything like that. But when the right person hears it,
Yeah,
that's
it's
when,
magic.
yeah, exactly it. That's magic.
It's magic. So if we take it all the way back in with this idea that we're a soul being
Hmm.
having a human being experience, our soul has been guiding the way
Hmm.
throughout our entire life, bringing us to this exact moment in time
Yeah.
where we can come into acceptance, when we when which moves us into surrender, which
Hmm.
then allows the grace to arrive, and
Yes.
we can we can share that experience, which does take a lot of courage
Hmm.
to do that, because you have to be willing not to care what other people think. And
Yeah.
that in itself, it takes a lot of courage. But in not caring, the reason why we don't care, it's not a malicious thing. It's because we have to be of service in the way that we're recognizing our story, and we
Hmm.
have to put it out there. That for me, I know that I always wondered why I was in addiction for so long, even though I had all these great mentors that I could see were in recovery for years and years, but I couldn't get there. I
Hmm.
couldn't get there no matter how many spiritual courses I took, no matter how I followed my own faith, until I was ready,
Hmm.
until the exact moment that I was ready to accept it and to come into surrender. So,
Yes.
for those who are listening that are still struggling, you're just on the journey to acceptance and
Hmm.
surrender and grace. And you have to be, as Ruth said, hungry for those answers, right? Hungry for the answers that you'll receive in surrender.
Mhm.
So, um, one of the things that I'm doing this year with Elizabeth Hill from Greenheart Living Press is we're going to do an anthology. An anthology is a book of individual authors, and each person writes a chapter, and the name of the anthology is going to be Surrender Your Story. And we're just really excited about that because we know in our own circle of friends and colleagues, and of course to anyone who's listening that's had this situation where you have had great or maybe didn't look so great trauma, because really guys, trauma doesn't always look like someone, if someone beat you,
Mhm.
it comes in all different forms. And so if you've been able to look at your trauma stories and heal them, and then take that information and share it with others, we're interested in speaking to you about being one of the writers and becoming an author of this book with us, because we know that there's so many people that I call it living the examined life, like where you take a look at all of your trauma patterns. It's not easy.
Mhm.
I know that. I recognize that. But we're hoping that if we can set up 21 examples of 21 brave people who have looked at their trauma and taken their story and used it as a healing tool for others, will just inspire the next generation of people
Mhm.
that will become um, uh, people who heal and serve humanity. Because you can't really get there until you've healed that trauma. You can't get there um, in the clearest way. And so that's why I thought, Ruth, there were so many years I was a spiritual teacher in addiction, and I always felt like almost like a fraud,
Mhm.
because I always knew like there was something else going on with me.
Mhm.
Right. And so there's so much more clarity for me, no pun on my business name, for me in recovery,
Yeah.
right? In grounded recovery, and share this message with others.
Mhm.
So, how can someone, do you think, recognize their own trauma stories?
I think that that starts with number one, understanding that everyone has a story.
Mhm.
I think we are, and this is no judgment on anybody. A lot of us are just existing. We're just surviving.
Mhm.
And I think that there comes a place in all our lives where we are in that space. We're just trying to get from point A to point B, from day 1 to day 2. But if we can get to that place where we understand there's more purpose in our lives than just existing. There's more purpose than just um surviving, that we can thrive, then
Mhm.
I think that that is the first place that we start. And once if you can get to that place, I think that that's where you can start surrendering your story. You can start realizing that you have a story to surrender. And just, everybody's path is different. I always hesitate to tell people, okay, well, you should do this or you should do that.
Mhm.
I think everyone should definitely write their story down,
Mhm.
from a day to day to day. I keep a journal every day, and eh, somebody would probably be bored if they read it because I do keep some mundane
Yeah.
details in it, but I'm able
Sure.
to go back and go, okay, this happened on this day. And I know what is happening in my life, and I can keep track of those details and understand, okay, well, this happened because of that.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a correlation with that. And, maybe there was trauma with that. So, the longer you can dig into it, whether you write your story, tell your story, or share your story, however you choose to do it, I think everyone should journal. I think everyone
Yes.
should keep track of what their story is, because eventually you will share it with somebody.
Yeah. And I think writing in a journal um, allows you to get it out of you.
Mhm.
Even if you never wrote a book or anything,
Right.
you still want to get it out of you,
Yes.
right? So that you can. if anything, even look at it this way: the more you release, the more light, the more there's space for more light
Yes,
in your life. And light is
absolutely.
inspiration and miracles and all of that kind of good stuff. So the more you excavate that stuff out,
Mhm,
in my courses, I teach writing courses. I'm teaching, starting next week, a course called The Right Recovery for Greenheart Living Press. So if you're
mhm,
interested in that, go to greenheartlivingpress.com. And that is about trying to decipher what your story is. What is your trauma story? And one of the suggestions I give to people, in that I love, is every day you should ask your soul what it is that it would like you to know today. And then just
yeah,
write for, even if you write for 1 minute, just say, what would you like me to know? And just let your pen go. Your
mhm,
pen will start writing. Things will come from your, focus on your heart, ask the question, and things will come out. And I always say your inspiration is the voice of your soul. So if you're getting inspiring thoughts, it's coming from
mhm.
inside of you, it's coming from within you. So we're heading to break again. You're listening to Hungry for Answers with me, Robin Clare, and my special guest, Ruth Griffin, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to Hungry for Answers with me, Robin Clare. To learn more about my work, please go to clarity.com, or on Instagram, Clarity by Robin, or Facebook, Clarity with Robin. And I'm here with Ruth Griffin. And Ruth, how can people reach out to you?
You can go to my website, ruthegriffin.com. I also have, I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. Ruth Elena Griffin
Yeah,
is my
perfect.
handle.
Yeah, that's great. So we're going to talk a little bit more about surrender, but we're going to take it in a new direction. We're going to go about authors and surrender, and
Yes.
I want to learn a little bit about Studio Griffin and Authors Up, your podcast. So
Mm.
do you see authors that come to you, both in your publishing company and your podcast? Do you recognize them as being in surrender from their story?
I do, and it's funny that you bring that up because um, I initially did not want to get started in publishing. I thought, okay, well, I'm a writer. That's all I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I started to realize, there is a lot more. There was something in me. I enjoyed the couple of people that I helped publish. I enjoyed doing that, and there was as I started doing that more and more, I noticed that I was getting a certain type of book. People who were coming to me were telling their stories, and I also write fiction, so I'm a fan of that. And I was like, okay, I really would like to get some more fiction books, but I was still getting people telling their stories, and I came to understand that was the purpose for
Mm-hmm.
Studio Griffin. That was my purpose,
Mm-hmm.
my call. But it was also, I was reading these stories, I was editing them, I was sharing them. Eventually we started the podcast, and I came to understand, these people were sharing of themselves, and some of the stories were just amazing, and I realized how much courage it took for them to share that, and I don't say that lightly because sometimes, you're sharing secrets that can help somebody out, but at the same time, you're like, well, will people judge me for that? And it's just, so I try to encourage people that that I publish or people that I put on the podcast, that is an amazing thing. You know, Thank you for telling your story. Thank you for surrendering, basically, to that, because that's going to help someone else. If you can step away from your story long enough to say, you know what, I'm not embarrassed by it. I'm going to share it regardless of what people may think. I think I see that honestly, as a form of surrender. And it's a beautiful thing because so much good can come out of it.
Mm-hmm. And also, when people are writing, it's possible they're writing about people that are still that are still alive,
Mhm.
right? Or people are going to be other members of their family are going to learn things that they
Yeah.
didn't know before.
Mhm.
Um, for me, when I was writing Feast and Famine, I was really hesitating to put it out there because this story was about my relationship with my mother and food, and really generations of trauma
Right.
around food and body image. And I remember my mom looked at me one day and she said, "So you're not holding this book up because you're afraid of what I'm going to think about it, are you?" And I'm like, exactly. And she said, "Don't worry about me. I lived it. I know what happened. I'm okay with what you wrote. Let it
Mhm.
out. Let it fly."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay, thanks, mom." But we do so in that, I would say, be honest with your
Yeah.
family and
Mhm.
anyone that would be impacted by your story, but help them to understand that you're taking this story to help others,
Yeah.
to put it out there. And I think that you will get the buy-in from your family,
Mhm.
or maybe not, but then you have to choose anyway. You
Yeah.
have to choose what's most important. Because I feel that especially as women, we have inherent in our own DNA and the DNA of all women a fear of persecution.
Yeah.
And because it's true. It's something that we've all experienced in many, many lifetimes. And so to put your story out as a woman takes a lot of courage. And of
Mhm.
course for men also, I'm not denying that for men.
Right.
But if you're afraid to put your book out there, to put your story out there, look at your persecution story and know that if you have the courage to do that, that you don't really have to worry about that. It's
Mhm.
not the same in this lifetime. Um, it will end well for most of us,
Yeah.
especially those that uh, serving the divine and
Yes.
having a story to tell that serves. It's so
Absolutely.
needed out there, everybody. It's so needed. Your story is incredible and needs to be told, because if
Absolutely.
even if you just help one person, even if you write your story and just share it with your family,
Mhm.
there's tremendous healing that will take place. And if you become the hero of your life, the hero of your family, you will heal the generations back and the generations forward.
Mhm.
So know that you're just not doing this for yourself. You're doing it for perhaps people out in the world, but certainly for your family, to heal. What do you think
Absolutely.
about that idea of healing with the generations when you do become the hero of your life?
Oh, I am, that is something that I'm definitely starting to see, especially with this last book. Our marriage was, my husband and I, our marriage was never, it wasn't volatile, but, our kids saw the silence. They saw the distance growing. And I know that by writing everything down, our first question to them was, they didn't necessarily get to read it, but they all got a copy of the book. So they're aware, they know the story. Um, but also in seeing what I've done,
Mhm,
I've stopped. And for me, I see it as, okay, all the, generational curses or whatever word that you want to use, all the bad things that, tend to go from generation to generation. I've halted that so that my kids can have a chance,
mhm.
so that, when they do enter in a long term relationship, they'll know, okay, mom and dad went through this, they did this. I know to do this. So, and I think that that is applicable in all senses. I think about my own family growing up. My grandmother was schizophrenic, my mother was very distant. There was a lot of, psychological trauma there
Mhm,
that, I know that by speaking, for me, sharing my story, it has um it's impactful even to other relatives who are now going through that same thing, so that whatever my grandmother went through, you know I can begin to heal for her, and
Yes.
then provide healing for, say, my nieces, my nephews, my cousins, whatever family members are still only beginning to walk through this. So
Yes. It's
I think it
beautiful.
covers the spectrum.
Yes. Beautiful. So going forward this year, what are your goals for yourself and for your business? What are you looking forward to?
I am looking forward to, and I think it's so interesting because I know when we spoke last year,
Mhm.
um, we had spoken about storytelling and all of that. And I knew that there was a purpose in my business, purpose even in the podcast and all that. But, I feel like my purpose is more pointed now, that I understand I'm here to help people tell their story, you
Yes.
know, and I was able to write my next book um, last November, and I'm already working on the sequel, even as I do the editing. So it flows in that vein. How do you tell your story? How do you surrender your story? So even when you sent that to me, it was just I knew it was divine. Because
Yes.
I understood. Okay, it's all fitting together, and this is what this year is.
Right.
So, you know, right now I don't have a whole lot of plans. I can't say I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but I
Yeah.
have an overall purpose. And I know that what I do is going to fall under this umbrella of, you know what, we're all going to share our story and we're all going to work together on that. And that's my purpose. So it's just, it falls underneath that. So I understand that, whatever it is that I will be working on specifically, it'll be about surrendering your story.
Yes, me too. That's why I think we're such kindred spirits,
Hmm.
because every time I turn around and I'm trying to stay in my lane, right?
Yeah.
I have a tendency to go into different lanes. So
Yep.
I try to stay in my lane, and it seems that it's all about that. It
Hmm.
seems it's about helping people use their story to understand their their suffering,
Yeah.
and to bring them into a place of recovery so
Hmm.
that they can share their story. And obviously, I am a big proponent of therapy,
Hmm. Hmm.
life coaching, having it's not just about writing, it's about
Yeah.
writing is just one of the tools. And so I know for sure that I'm going to continue to help on the writing end. I'm going to
Hmm.
continue to have this podcast so that I could bring on guests like
Yes.
yourself who help in all the different pieces of it,
Hmm.
right? Um, and I'm looking forward to. I'm already booking out into April for guests, because I just opened. I surrendered to, this is not my podcast. This is
Yep.
the Divine's podcast, right? And
Hmm.
and so who do you want to be on, and when do you want them to be on? And
Yep.
I'm allowing that to unfold in the most gracious way. And I'm hoping that at the end of the year, I'll see like a pattern,
Hmm.
like I'm allowing the pieces to come in without having to know exactly where I'm going to at the end of the season.
Yeah.
But to me, that I've been listening to Michael Singer's The Surrender Experiment,
Mhm.
and it's such an interesting book. And he talks about that every time in his life he said he was guided to do, not guided, something came up in his life and he immediately said, no, I don't want
Mhm.
to do that. That's not what I want to do. He did it anyway because he knew that I don't want to do it was coming from a place of resistance. And
Right.
so he said, I'm just going to do it because I said no. So everything I say no to, I'm going to do so I can turn that no into yes.
Yeah.
And it allowed him to have this amazing journey of the last 40 years of being on the spiritual path. And
Mhm.
I'm hopeful for all of our listeners that, you follow your own heart,
Yeah.
follow your own journey. If you need help, There's help for you out there if you're still in an addictive place, but there's also help within.
Mm.
And hopefully, Ruth and I have helped you to understand the art of surrender and what to, opportunities that you can have with your story. And until next time, thank you, Ruth, for being here with me.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. And you're listening to Hungry for Answers, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you for tuning into Hungry for Answers. Learning to love ourselves is the one true solution to addiction. Make a commitment to healing today and see how you can reach your ultimate potential. Remember, you have a divine right to a life filled with love, joy, peace, and abundance. To learn more about me and my offerings, please go to clarity.com. That's Clare, CLARE-ITY.com. See you next time.